What is happening, everyone? The football therapist here. Talk about two guys, Julio Jones and Mike Thomas, who were high risk, high reward players going into 2021. Let's hit that intro. So guys, Julio Jones is the first player out of these two high risk, high reward players I'm going to be talking about. And they're high risk, high reward players to me because depending on where their ADP falls, it can either be a huge risk drafting them or a really high reward potentially getting a steal. Now, Julio Jones, we know he's been elite throughout his career. Since 2017, he's finished as the wide receiver 7, the wide receiver 4, the wide receiver 3, before ultimately getting hurt last season. And that wide receiver 7 was his worst mark since 2013. Now, last season, when healthy, he had 3 wide receiver 1 games. He never truly was healthy, though, throughout the year, and that's really a big concern. He had 4 separate hamstring injuries, and that hamstring injury for a wide receiver is really difficult to overcome. I mean, we saw it with Kenny Golladay last season. We saw it with Julio Jones. Hamstring injuries are really impactful for the wide receiver position. But let's look now why Julio Jones could be a steal, and that's based on where his ADP is falling. I mean, if you have to tell me that I'm putting in a second rounder for Julio Jones, I will avoid that at all costs. Maybe even the 3rd round. But right now he's going off as the wide receiver 12 at the 3.11 during the mock draft season. Of course, this is very early, but some of the ADP looks really promising for potentially getting Julio Jones as a steal. Now let's look at some of the players around him right now. I mean, right now you have AJ Brown, Allen Robinson, Mike Evans, then you have Julio Jones, you have Terry McLaurin, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, Amari Cooper, and then Chris Godwin, and then further back there's even CeeDee Lamb. So you have to draw that line of where you want to take that risk with Julio Jones. Some guys that I would probably draft over him that were behind him on this list: Terry McLaurin, I think he could be a wide receiver 1 with the right quarterback. Justin Jefferson just proved that he could ball out. I would 100% take Justin Jefferson over Julio Jones. Amari Cooper was the wide receiver 1 before Dak Prescott went down, so I would take Amari Cooper before Julio Jones. And then also probably Chris Godwin and CeeDee Lamb, as I am both very high on those players. However, in this 4th round range, I think in a couple leagues, it's worth the risk to take Julio Jones as your 2nd wide receiver or 3rd wide receiver off the board. As we see, he has that top 6 wide receiver potential. It's just, do you believe he could stay healthy? So that line of that 3.11 right now is the perfect line for me to where I would say that he's worth the risk if you could get him a little farther back. If you guys haven't done so already, subscribe, like, share, and comment below. What are you doing? So let's talk about Michael Thomas now. He's a player, in my opinion, who is a little bit in a murky situation. They don't have a quarterback right now for next year, the New Orleans Saints. We don't know if Drew Brees is coming back. We don't know if Jameis Winston will be the starter. And right now, to me, I'm kind of not buying into Michael Thomas. But again, he is a high risk, high reward player. And let me tell you why. Back in 2019, he led the league in targets with 186. It was almost 30 more than the next best player. He was a volume king. Yet, one of the aspects that really concerned me, he was 70th in yards per reception and 21st in yards per target. So it was pretty much all volume based. Now his ADP going into next year is wide receiver 7, which is right now at the 2.8 based on Fantasy Football Calculator. But if we look back historically before his last historic season, the best that he's done is wide receiver 5. From 2016 on, he was wide receiver 7, 5, and 6 respectively. So that's why I'm a little bit more concerned about Michael Thomas where the ADP lands, because he doesn't have a super high ceiling depending on who the quarterback is, and he still, to me, has a little bit of the same risk right now as Julio Jones based on where his ADP is. It's a little bit more riskier. So if we look at the ADP of the players around him, DK Metcalf comes in at wide receiver 5, Calvin Ridley, then it's Michael Thomas, then it's Keenan Allen, AJ Brown, Allen Robinson, and Mike Evans. Now to me, if I had to draft these guys right now, I would take Calvin Ridley over him. I would take Keenan Allen over him. I would take AJ Brown over him. I would probably take Allen Robinson over him depending on where he landed. And then I'd probably go back and forth with DK Metcalf. I have my concerns about Metcalf. I talked about it a little bit on my last video with my wide receiver rankings. Check it out if you haven't already. So there's a couple of more guys to me that are safer, have higher upside than Michael Thomas right here in that second round. Where I start getting a little bit more excited is if you start going with Michael Thomas in the third round and he starts dipping a little bit more, because hey, that's what people are doing right now. They're passing up Michael Thomas. If he starts falling past Allen Robinson and he's in that 3.8 range with Mike Evans and you grab him, I would be really happy. That's the line right there, that mid-third to the fourth round, where I think he could be a huge value going in to the 2021 season as a low-end wide receiver 1. I think that he would be a terrific player right there. And in dynasty leagues, I think he's a little bit of a buy low, depending on what the owner is doing. If it's a win now owner, you may not be able to get him. But if it's an owner who's rebuilding, you may be able to offer a low first for him. So let me know what you think about both of these players, Michael Thomas and Julio Jones, below. Are you going to be drafting him where their ADP at is now? Or do you like to see their value dip a little bit like I do? Let me know.